Piloten Ray Harrington skulle dræbe tyskere.
The whole effort was to sink ships, and that's what we did.
Men han blev selv skudt ned over Danmark.
I can remember saying, I don't want my life.
Ray blev skudt ned i det vestlige Danmark i 1945, hvor modstandsbevægelsen stod svagt. Her blev piloterne normalt overgivet til tyskerne.
Sådan foregik det. Desværre. Det var helt forfærdeligt.
Men i dette tilfælde satte en række modstandsfolk livet på spil for piloten.
Det er jo ikke sådan småtteri. Det er jo ikke en juledag, det her.
De unge flyvere, navigatøren Burt Winwood og piloten Raymond Harrington, havde været faste makkere i deres mosquitojager siden 1942.
We were carrying rockets, 4 under each wing, and they were either explosive or just solid concrete. And we would dive down on the ship, and the rockets would come down like that.
De var specialister i at sænke skibe. I Royal Air Force havde de øgenavnet Shipbusters.
We had also 20mm cannon, 4 of those, and another 303 machine guns in the wings. We were well armed, but the things that did the damage were the rockets. The rockets would come down on a certain path, and the idea was to get them to hit the water so that they would flip up into the ship. We did a lot of training on it, and at that time we were quite ahead of the crowd in using that particular method. We had fair success, I would say.
Mosquitoerne var svært bevæbnede, men missionerne var farlige, fordi flyene kom meget tæt på deres mål. Ray og Burt mistede mange kammerater under krigen.
They pulled out about 20 or 30 feet, so I always used to laugh and say, we're the European, Japanese kamikaze, except we pull out before we hit the ship.
I dag bor Ray Harrington her i byen Tenterden i det sydlige England. Også den by bærer stadig præg af krigen. Ray bor sammen med konen Betty, som han har kendt siden barndommen.
I saw him once or twice with a young man called Anthony Pickard, who died in the army in the war, whom I'd known at Sunday school. And he mentioned me to Anthony, I like that girl, and Anthony said, well, I know her. Oh, will you introduce me? So he did. So then that was the start of it all.
Ray og Burt blev trænet i Sydafrika og blev umiddelbart efter sendt til Royal Air Force-basen Gambut her i Libyen.
Instead of being sent back home, he wasn't. He was sent up to the Middle East on operations. So I didn't see him for 2 years.
We were sent to a squadron in the Western Desert, and was once described as the worst airfield in the Middle East. It certainly was dusty, windy, and hard to live in a tent, really. But we did. We got together. It was a good thing, really, because we shared tents, Baz and I, and gradually you got to know your fellow air crew.
Burt Winwood og Ray Harrington var i Libyen som en del af en enhed, der skulle sænke tyske skibe i Middelhavet, specielt omkring Grækenland.
30,000 German troops were still left in the islands. Our main objective was to chase up any troop ships, warships or anything in the way of the convoy, which was actually intended to take them back to Europe. It was quite dangerous flying, but thrilling.
I 1943, mens Ray kæmpede i Middelhavet, blev han og Betty forlovet via brev. De sendte hinanden disse billeder.
He wasn't very romantic, and his letters were would very often end yours sincerely, Ray. But until he was commissioned, he knew that the letters were all going to be censored, and he was a bit embarrassed about writing anything more loving. So you'd get a letter and you'd be thrilled to bits, and you'd look at the end and it would be yours sincerely, Ray, and be disappointed.
Kortet her er fra Libyen. Bagpå står der:
Photograph taken by an Arab with an extreme primitive camera. The perspective seemed to have given me a paunch. This is not yet the case, however, although it might soon be as a result of the inactive life I'm leading just now.
Ingen kærlige hilsner fra Ray. I slutningen af 1944 fik Ray og Bert skiftet støv og varme ud med sne og kulde. Shipbusters blev flyttet til basen Banff i det nordligste Skotland.
This is where the convoy is supposed to be. If you see nothing, go on down the leads as far as Sonia Fjord and then come home. Okay?
Yes, sir.
At the time we got there, it was winter in England, and 6-foot banks of snow in the Scottish villages. It was extremely cold.
The squadrons of mosquitoes and bowfighters stood by each day in readiness.
Filmen her er produceret under krigen af Royal Air Force, netop om Ray og Berts base i Skotland. Fra basen i Banff kunne Ray nu besøge Betty i London, når han havde orlov.
We used to talk a very great deal. We used to talk quite late into the night about all sorts of things. We really got to know one another very, very well.
For Shipbusters var opgaven nu at stoppe forsyningskonvojer fra Norge og Sverige på vej mod Tyskland.
We had to try and get them in these very steeply sided fjords, which was some, I think fair to say, some very dicey, as we call it, or dangerous flying, because you very often you hardly miss the ground in pulling out from some of those awkward places. But nevertheless, that was our job, and we carried on doing that right to the end.
Ray og Bert var med på dette togt i Norge. Og med i angrebet på dette skib, filmet med det indbyggede kamera i deres fly. Kort tid efter sagde Ray sit sidste farvel til Betty efter en orlov.
I had a feeling when he went back from his last leave back to Banff, I had a very, very nasty feeling. His leave dates were changed, and I can remember saying to my father, I don't like this, and he said, no, I don't think I do either.
Den 4. april, en måned før krigens slutning i Danmark, blev Ray kaldt til briefing på basen her i Banff.
The bigger ships are known to be carrying guns and heavy equipment withdrawn from Finland on their way back to Germany.
It was round about lunchtime, and we had to scramble and leave our lunches and go to a special briefing where we were shown maps of where this was.
Let's go.
So we took off about 2 o'clock, I'd say, after lunch, and unusually flew straight across Denmark on a heading of almost due east. We're flying, when I say this, at about 50 feet, or sometimes less. Why? Because all the radar on the enemy side could pick us up, especially a large group of 30, say, aircraft. they could pick us up very easily if we flew much higher than that. So it was good fun. I loved low flying. I think we all did. But you had to keep out of the radar zone. As we approached Denmark, quite suddenly men came pouring out of little holes in the ground, running along to the coastal guns just as we arrived, and I remember giving them a quick flick just to encourage them.
Optagelserne her er fra Race Squadron 235 fra et lignende angreb i Kattegat en måned tidligere, hvor Ray også var med. Men en måned senere, under Rays sidste mission den 4. april 1945, fandt de også frem til 4 tyske skibe. Omkring 30 fly angreb. En af Rays venner fløj ind i masten på den tyske minestryger Hans Sachse.
Actually, he was a young guy. He smashed into the mast of the ship, and the aircraft just went straight into the sea.
Ifølge søforklaringen senere i Frederikshavn fra Hans Sachses tyske kaptajn var der ingen spor efter overlevende fra flyet. Piloten Arthurs og navigatøren Richardson blev dræbt under missionen.
But then we went skating back across Denmark, because by then they knew we were coming back, and they had all their guns pointing upwards.
På vejen retur ind over Limfjorden var tyskerne i alarmberedskab. Og ved Mors lavede et fly foran Ray og Bert en undvigemanøvre væk fra luftskytset på et eskortefartøj i Nykøbing Havn.
As we were flying very low indeed, and all I remember of that is that feeling a tremendous judder, and the plane doing that. I think it got in the slipstream of the guy in front of me. Anyway, it only did that sort of thing, but it was low enough for the propeller to hit the ground.
Propellen på flyets venstre vinge ramte en bakketop og blev deformeret.
The whole situation is one that requires immediate action. I was just totally absorbed by the flying requirements to get it down in one piece.
Ray og Berts Mosquito var nu nået til Thy og blev tvunget til at nødlande her til venstre for hovedvejen nord for Bedsted.
Hell of a noise when it hit the ground, and I was, well, I think to use an expression, I was probably keeping my legs tightly closed, I think, because waiting, was it going to explode or wasn't it, you know?
Få timer tidligere blev flyet gjort klar her i Banff. Nu stod det som et attraktivt bytte for tyskerne på en mark i Bedsted.
I said to Bert, I think we've got to burn this aircraft. It's got a lot of secret equipment on it. We pulled the parachutes and pushed them down into the cockpit and fired. We found the very pistol and fired shots into that, and it caught fire.
Historien bredte sig hurtigt i lokalområdet, også til modstandsmanden Christian Hammer. Han var gået under jorden som Hans Christian Svane efter et mislykket attentat mod tyskerne.
Det var jo temmelig mange flyvere, som faldt ned, eller blev skudt ned herover. Men når flyvere de kom ind og søgte hjælp, så ringede de til dansk politik, og så kom der jo en dansk politikbetjent, som ringede til tyskere, som kom og overhentede dem. Sådan foregik det, desværre. Det var helt forfærdeligt. Helt forfærdeligt.
Christian Hammer, der var leder af en lokal modstandsgruppe, blev ringet op af en fra gruppen.
Der er nogen, der har fortalt ham, at der var noget andet end den engelske maskine derude. Og der var 2 flyvere, som var helt uskadt.
The oil had caught fire. There was a great plume of black smoke going straight up in the air about 200 or 300 feet. So everybody in Western Denmark could see that. They had been ringing up, apparently, from various coastal places saying, "What's gone wrong? What's happened over in your area?" to somebody, and they would say, "Oh, it's nothing." The Danes said it's a farm wagon's caught fire, and we're putting it out.
På vej væk fra det brændende fly i Bedsted mødte englænderne gårdmandsparret Preben og Inge Lytøft.
Så kommer de til de her 2 flyvere, de kommer jo i uniformer hen til. Og fru Lytøft, hun var gået til engelsk, så hun kunne snakke med dem.
And we said, could you give us some old clothes or something so we could pretend we'd be farm workers to escape?
Men Lytøft, de ville ikke have dem ind på gården. Så de sagde nej, de viste dem, der var nogle halmstakker ude. De kunne gemme dem derude på. Og de frarådede dem, de ville heller ikke give dem der civiltøj.
So she declined the suits, but she said, I thought it was rather nice, like a British middle-class place. She said, I can let you have a haystack just over the hill there, as if it was a nice little cottage, you know. Anyway, I said, right, over the hill, into the haystack, which I might tell you was really scratchy. I've never tried to get into a dry haystack before. I don't think I will anymore. It was terrible.
Da de øvrige fly fra missionen kom tilbage til Banff, blev der udsendt flere tragiske telegrammer til de pårørende.
I came home from work, and my mother opened the door, and I just took one look at her face, and she said, "Oh, my darling, I've got the most dreadful news for you." And she told me, I don't know how I staggered into the house, but I can remember my little dog, who wanted to be welcome, was scraping up my coat, and I wasn't taking any notice of her, and I clutched onto a chair and almost fainted. I can remember saying, "I don't want my life."
Efter 2 døgns flugt fik Thor og Christian Hammers modstandsfolk englænderne her til Thisted, hvor de fik tøj og falske ID-kort.
They had the forms for the identity cards, so they had to stick this photograph on. They looked through their family albums to see if they could find 2 faces which looked remotely like ours, and they stuck them in.
En modstandsmand fra Mors, Walter Pedersen, skulle nu sammen med en vognmand køre englænderne til Nykøbing. Men de måtte først passere vagtposterne her ved Vilsundbroen med deres falske ID.
We both realized that this might well be the end of the journey, sort of thing.
Fordi englænderne nu var klædt i civil tøj, kunne tyskerne dødsdømme dem som spioner. Klædt i uniform ville de blive behandlet som krigsfanger.
Hvis de blev fanget af tyskere, så når de havde uniform på, så var de spioner, så skød de dem på stedet.
We drove in this taxi down the slope to where the soldier was, and he was dressed like a German soldier, you know, with the bandolier with the hand grenades on and all that, and a rifle.
Der var ingen tvivl om, at de ville have kørt selv om de var blevet stoppet. Det var der slet ingen tvivl om.
The Danes, whilst we in the back were trying desperately to look unconcerned, the Danes engaged them in quite a lot of laughing chatter and so on. And he just took our cards, the soldier took our cards, hardly looked at them, handed them back, which was a brilliant piece of acting on the part of the Danish driver and his colleague. Let's say we learned to be quite good character actors in about 5 minutes.
Englænderne kom nu til Nykøbing, hvor de tidligere var blevet angrebet af tyskerne. Her mødte de Ejby Nielsen, en af den jyske modstandsbevægelses øverste ledere. Han var også under jorden i Nykøbing. Det var på dag 2, da Betty havde fået besked.
Well, you just had to imagine that the plane had crashed and he died quickly. And that there would be a grave probably somewhere over in Denmark. You just existed, I suppose. I lost a lot of weight and didn't eat. The thing was that during that time, I didn't hope. I thought it was best not to. I just was trying to get myself used to the idea that I'd lost him.
Englænderne boede nu her i et kolonihavehus i Nykøbing.
Ejby Nielsen, da han så dem, han skyndte sig og tog dem med til fotograf, så de fik lavet nogle ordentlige billeder.
Somebody had a Leica and took photographs of us.
Og så fik han lavet noget rigtig legitimationskort.
Still fake, but newish looking. In fact, we were told to wiggle them around a bit to make them look a bit more used.
En uge efter missionen på Kattegat og nødlandingen i Thy lykkedes det dem at få en hemmelig besked hjem til Betty i England via modstandsbevægelsen.
Their father telephoned and he read it over the phone and we rejoiced together and he said, well, we'll still be careful and watch and pray for the best.
I telegrammet står der blandt andet: Raymond Harrington landede i besat område, men han er i live og har det godt. Desuden at Betty skal sørge for at holde den gode nyhed hemmelig. Hvis det slipper ud, kan det betyde, at hendes kæreste bliver krigsfange, og at dem, som gemmer ham, uden tvivl vil få dødsstraf.
I'd already asked one of the squadron leaders at the ministry if he could do anything to make inquiries, and he was making inquiries through the Red Cross, and I had to tell him to stop everything. And I remember the RAF personnel at the ministry saying to me, "Oh, this looks like really good news."
Med de nye identitetskort var de 2 unge englændere dristige og bevægede sig ud i Nykøbing, hvor der var mange tyskere. Blandt andet gik de en tur ned til havnen.
We went down to the Limfjord. There was a bit of a small crowd along the edge, and they were Danes and Germans, I suppose, but they were all affably making jokes with the German sailors. They were all in quite a humorous and friendly mood. And so we stood there in amongst the other people there, rubbing shoulders with them. This chap was painting the outline of the mosquito on his funnel with great joy. And everybody was sort of, that's bad, do that better there, and all that sort of thing. We stayed there 20 minutes, half an hour before they dispersed, and we dispersed.
Fra Nykøbing skulle de 2 englændere med toget via Skive til Aalborg, og derfra via Strandby til Sverige. Men i toget på vejen til Aalborg var de nær blevet afsløret. De rejste alene og kunne ikke tale dansk.
This large fat lady carrying 2 blankets full of washing, bundled them in, forced them through the narrow door, and stopped up right opposite Bert with the sort of puffing and Bert, I suppose, he put in the dilemma, must have thought to himself, God, what do I do here? Do I get up or do I stay put? But anyway, he chose to get up. Which wouldn't have been so bad if she hadn't immediately started, not exactly shouting, but sort of more or less saying words which in English might be, what the hell are you doing? What do you think? I can't stand up on my own or something, something like that. So Bert was told off, and he was unfortunately not able to move very far because the train was moderately full, and it had about half a dozen German soldiers in uniform, guys going onto a post or on leave or something, and they started twisting their heads around. They'd up to then be doing the usual thing of telling jokes and all the rest of it. Fortunately, she stopped squawking fairly quickly after that. Everybody settled down.
I Aalborg måtte modstandsmanden Just Carl Pedersen gå under jorden, ligesom også kammeraten Tolstrup, der var leder af modstandsbevægelsen i Jylland. De blev konstant jagtet af Gestapo, der brugte alle metoder for at stoppe Tolstrups virke.
Når han havde boet i en villa et eller andet sted, sådan noget, så kom de, og så sprængte de luften. De var skånselsløse, Gestapo. Man gik ud af den ene dør, de kom ind af den anden dør, og så i raseri, så lagde de på bomben og knaldede skidt i luften. Det er jo ikke sådan småtteri, det er jo ikke en juledag, det her.
Just Carl Pedersen var Tolstrups højre hånd. Da han gik under jorden, blev han flyttet til fiskerbyen Strandby, hvor han fik ansvaret for transporter af flygtninge og våben mellem Jylland og Sverige.
I sin oprindelse, der er det et spørgsmål om at få flygtninge ud af landet. Ikke? Folk, som er nervesammenbrud og så videre, eller nogen, også ofte nogen, som vi synes, at vi trængte til at få væk, de var for at snakke sag og sådan noget. Ikke? Indimellem kommer der så jødiske flygtninge. Der er jo en del jøder. Ikke?
Ray og Bert kom her til fiskerbyen Strandby få dage før tyskernes kapitulation. Billederne her er filmet få dage senere. Mens de ventede på, at deres skib kunne sejle, blev de indlogeret hos Just Carl Pedersens venner, fiskerfamilien Åen.
De tog alting, fordi de havde altid været her med sig. Der var ikke nogen tvivl. Vi stoler på dig, Just, og vi stoler på vor herre, så er det godt.
They have a kind of sense of don't let it worry you, chum, sort of thing. But they were very kind, and we were able to talk a lot because most of them did have a bit of English.
I Strandby ventede de på, at modstandsbevægelsen skulle befri en af deres frontfigurer, maleren Carlo Vonsen, der lå på et hospital i Sønderborg. Han var blevet tortureret her hos Gestapo i Aalborg.
Og ved Sønderborg, ved hans seng, der sidder der konstant 2 soldater på vagt. Det viser sig, at disse 2 soldater, de er østrigere. Og de kan ikke lide krigen. Det er der ikke noget at sige til dem. Og de vil godt være med til en befrielse under forudsætning af, at de kommer med.
Just Carl Pedersen fik til opgave at sende østrigerne med til Sverige i samme båd som Ray og Bert.
Og så kører de i 2 taxaer, som man altså lavede det dengang. Ikke? Og de kommer til en vejspærring, og den kører de igennem. Men så kommer der en bil mere, det synes tyskerne er for meget, og de stopper den. Og i den bil, der sidder Carl Vonsen og Engelske. Og så tilkalder de der vagt, så tilkalder de Gestapo, og de kommer og lukker døren op og siger, jamen goddag Vonsen. Ham kendte de jo fra mig, de jo tæske sunder samtidig. Nu begyndte det skulle blive alvorligt.
I Strandby ankom der derfor kun de 2 østrigere, som skulle med til Sverige.
Og så skulle jeg sørge for at overtale mine fiskere til at tage 2 tyskere med uden betaling, nemlig Vonsen. Det var en af de vanskeligste situationer, jeg havde været i, at man nu pludselig, fordi trods alt ligegyldigt, hvordan man vender og drejer det, så er det med livet på højkant hver gang.
Da Ray og Bert endelig skulle afsted med dette skib, FN Mågen, var det altså i selskab med de østrigske soldater.
There were 2 men with rather large brimmed hats on who kept their heads down a lot. And I don't remember them saying anything. I don't remember them looking particularly German or anything like that. I think we're all too concerned with ourselves and what was going to happen. But I wasn't as surprised as all that to find that the resistance had done a trade-in, as it were, with a couple of Germans who'd done something useful for them. And it all becomes a kind of different level of rules for life, if you like.
Om natten den 23. april 1945 krydsede FN Mågen Kattegat, hvor englænderne havde sænket 3 tyske skibe og deres besætninger 18 døgn tidligere. Den 2. maj, 28 dage senere end planlagt, landede Ray og Bert igen i Skotland. Bert tog til Birmingham og Ray videre til London.
Then I can remember his father ringing me and saying, "I've got somebody here I think you might like to see."
I was upstairs in my parents' bedroom looking out the window, and I heard the front door go, and
They said he's upstairs and he was sitting in the bedroom.
heard steps, and I thought, that's got to be Betty coming up. There's got to be. I think we did, obviously, rush to each other's arms and kiss each other, but it was almost like meeting a desirable stranger.
And we sat holding hands and didn't speak for ages.
It's not real. It didn't feel real for, I think, perhaps a week before we settled back into our old ways.
To dage efter Ray og Bettys genforening kapitulerede tyskerne i Danmark.
Båden modtages med salut fra maskingeværer.
På billederne her ses modstandslederen Tolstrup på besøg hos folkene i Strandby, umiddelbart efter kapitulationen. Bag ham står just Carl Pedersen, der senere blev æresmedlem af The Royal Air Force Escaping Society.
Og det har jeg jo helt umiddelbart reelt sagt. Det har jeg altid været stolt af. Det synes jeg, det er smukt gjort.
To år efter krigen blev Ray og Betty gift i England med Bert Winwood som forlover. Med til brylluppet var Rigmor Åen, datteren til den fiskerfamilie Ray og Bert boede hos i Strandby. Og her har Ray og Betty senere besøg af familien Åen i Tenterden. De 18 døgn i modstandsbevægelsens hænder i Danmark fylder meget for Ray og Bert. Her genser de deres flugtrute i Thy og Nykøbing sammen med Christian Hammer i 1991. Og senere i 1995, på 50-årsdagen for kapitulationen, var de på besøg i Aalborg.
We've been married now 62 years, and every year of that 62 years we owe to the people who saved him. That's how we feel.